think we can start. I'm very pleased to be here today, since because for once I won't have to explain what open data or anything like this means, because you will be able to explain it better to me. So it's extremely cool. It's very different when I speak before audiences with mostly politicians or people from public administration. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion after the keynote. I know that I'm separating you from the cool part of today, and probably already had a very intense day, so I'll try to do it as short as possible, but as long as necessary, so you can ask questions, or maybe also tell us or tell me what you think about the law I will be talking about, or the process that was behind it. But before I dive into this whole EMBAG story, I need to tell you from what perspective I'm speaking, and I have two. The first is C++. We are a Swiss NGO focused mainly or almost exclusively on Swiss policies and Swiss politics, mostly on the federal level. I'm the Secretary General and also the only employee. That means that every subject or every issue we're working at is going through me. And we rely very heavily on a network of experts, of course, from the research universe, but also from economics, from politics, etc. Because we're a child of the COVID struggles in Switzerland. Maybe if you're from Switzerland, you remember huge struggles we had with data transmission via fax, but maybe you also come from a country where you had similar issues. So we decided that COVID created an opportunity to change the mentalities in Swiss administration and politics about digitalization and scientific progress also, and also the research policies. We mainly intervene on the political level, like what I already said, and mostly we are lobbying. We're a lobby organization. We try to master the political processes, and we try to influence mostly lawmaking processes on federal level. We're quite small, but I think we're quite powerful because of our network, and if we're very small, that means that we're very independent on the funding level, what allows us to maybe sometimes say things or do things that others can't because they had funding from the state, etc. If you have any questions about how we work, etc., I will ask them after the keynote and tell you how we work on a daily basis. To myself, I don't have an IT or technological background. I have a political science background, public administration background, and I've been involved in Swiss politics for already 15 years. So it's mostly my colleagues that have the technological, the IT expertise, and I'm here for the political part. So I can answer a lot of questions about how the Swiss political system works, a little bit less about APIs, standards, etc. But like I already said, you know it better than I do. So what will I be talking about today is a law that's not really well known by large public. I don't think that anybody in Switzerland really heard about the EMBAG law. So the Federal Act on Electronic Means for the Fulfillment of Official Duties, and it's the English translation. I mean, I've been working on this law for maybe 1 year and a half, and I did not manage to learn this name by heart. It's extremely technical, and this whole law is, of course, extremely technical if you're not involved in IT or in open source software or open data. But if you're a little bit involved in this universe, this law is quite innovative, and I would even say it's quite groundbreaking. So what is this law about? Actually, if you want to read it, unfortunately, of course, this law exists only in French, Italian, and German. You can go on fedlex.ch, search for EMBAG. You will see the actual version of EMBAG, because of course the devil is always in the details, like we say it in German. So what is this law about? It's one of, I think it's one of the first laws on this planet. It has following principles, open by default. So an extremely important part of the law is that the state has to make its own data open. It's called open government data. Of course, public money, public code. The law enables the Confederation, the federal administration to make its own source code public. It has binding standards, of course, the creation of APIs. It allows the Confederation, the federal administration, to do pilot projects without having to change the law, because now if you want to try anything new in the administration, you have to have a legal base. You don't need to have it anymore with the EMBAG. And also, and this is very interesting, some kind of seed funding for public and private digitalization projects. That means that the civil society or the civil tech scene has its own article in this law. And this is also quite groundbreaking for Switzerland. So how is it possible? Where do we come from, and what are the perspectives on this law? Actually, the starting point for this EMBAG law is extremely difficult. Why? Well, the Swiss administration, maybe you work inside the Swiss administration, maybe you work for them, there is quite some digital backlog. Switzerland is really on the administrative level quite lagging regarding technology and digitalization. And I mean, this is quite paradoxical, because if you look at the polytechnical schools or universities in Switzerland, the startup scene, like Switzerland is extremely well placed on a lot of if you really look at the economical or the research part of digitalization and technologies, but there is no transfer between the universities, etc., the startup scene and the administration. So those two worlds are still quite separated on the federal level, but also on the regional, the cantonal level. The civil society is limited. That does not mean that we are limited, but it's extremely limited, because if you look, for example, at Germany, there are public fundings for civil society. I mean, of course, it also has its downsides, but civil society in Switzerland does not get any public funding. We completely rely on private foundations, on people who make a lot of money and who support us, so that the civil society in Switzerland is quite small, but we will see that even if it's small, it can be quite powerful. We also have a highly decentralized federal system. I mean, we have 27 systems in Switzerland, the federal one, 26 cantons. That also means that we have 27 public procurement strategies. They're different, the interests are different. The cantons do not buy the same software as the Confederation, etc. So we come from afar. And there is another very important part. It's how Switzerland depends on U.S. tech firms. Here you have it's quite an actual article from SRF, from the Swiss public broadcasting company, how much money Switzerland spends on I think it's Microsoft. So for a very long time before EMBAG, the Confederation mostly bought solutions from the market, especially from the huge American tech firms. And I mean, at the beginning, it was you could say it was a conflict between Swiss firms who wanted to implement, who wanted to sell their own solutions, or often open source solutions, and of course a conflict between them and tech firms. And I mean, today, if you look at what's happening in the world, and especially in the USA, this dependency becomes an issue of national security. So of course, this is a very important topic right now. So this EMBAG law that was voted in the last 2 to 3 years is actually quite an interesting success story between civil society, public administration, and the Swiss Parliament, and it's very interesting to know how it became reality. But before going to the parliamentary part, I mean, the open data, open source community in Switzerland exists for quite a long time. I think CH Open was founded around the 80s. 2012, Open Data was founded. So there are a lot of different civil society organizations who brought different concepts to Switzerland. I mean, it started with hackathons. Hackathons still exist in Switzerland, and they still allow a lot of interesting collaboration between the administration and the tech ecosystem. Those NGOs also establish concepts like data as infrastructure, software as common good. And I mean, before we were really in a universe where the administration considered that security came through obscurity. But of course, civil society alone cannot establish laws, does not have enough political power to do any real change. What happened was the construction of ecosystem. A lot of people, a lot of enthusiasts were highly involved in those NGOs. Later went working or became collaborators of the administration, became enthusiasts of open government data, of open source software inside the administration, and that's how the open data or open source community was able actually to have the first contact, the first interested people, interested offices in the federal administration. So there was a very interesting collaboration established between civil society and administration. But of course, they prepared the ideas, they changed a little bit, maybe not a little bit, they changed the philosophy inside the public administration. But of course, at some point, you need to write a law. And that's also where CH++ had a very important role, because like I already told you before, we are really focused on political processes. And we have highly contributed in this phase. What you see on my slide is what we call a fact sheet. It's what we send when there is a law discussed in the parliament, especially in the committees. We need and we want to influence this law. We have to explain every sentence of this law and what we want it to be to the parliamentary members. I mean, we're in 2025, everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, I don't know what. But you have to imagine that in every political party that we have in the federal parliament, there's maybe 1 or 2 members who really understand what we are talking about when we are talking about, I don't know, APIs, standards, etc., and who are really interesting sparring partners and with whom we can do those projects, try to influence or try to write those laws. All of the other members are not really interested by the subject. Digitalization in Switzerland, even today, is still a niche subject. I mean, it's quite clear there is no politician in Switzerland, almost no politician in Switzerland at all, and of course none at the federal level, who are elected or not elected because they understand what digitalization means. This is not important enough in the political agenda setting. Of course, we try to change it, but still, it was a huge work to prepare. I mean, you have a lot of different members in those committees, so even the members who never thought or read about digitalization needed to understand every part of this law, because if they understand it, we can explain to them what we want to have changed, etc. So we were writing those fact sheets for months for every committee that was working on this law. And also, last small detail, I mean, we have a lot of people with us, and I will show you then the votes, the different votes in the parliament, and you'll see that the EMBAG actually, biggest part of the parliament was really in favor of this law, but we still had to fight against a lot of different opinions. Of course, the right-wing party, the SVP in Switzerland, is actually a political party that's mostly against digitalization. I mean, it's also the only political party on federal level who's, for example, completely against the electronic identity that we are talking about right now in Switzerland. We cannot put them on. Of course, we still have some politicians in this party who help us a lot, but it's mostly a party we know that we cannot do digitalization projects with them. But of course, some people from some members of parliament from the Liberal Party. Why? Because some of them think that tech firms from the US are a better alternative than, for example, Swiss firms. But also because they don't want to have a bigger state. And if you're talking about upskilling and resources, if you're talking about digital sovereignty, we need to have a state, we need to have a federal administration with good people, with the talented people, etc. And of course, liberals often don't want the state to become bigger. But this is also very interesting. We had some opposition, and still have, from the left-wing parties, and especially it doesn't concern really the open source software, but it has something to do with open government data. A lot of them, especially from the French-speaking part of Switzerland, where I come from, tell us that if the government puts the data for everybody to use, I mean, this was our main argument, like, if you want innovation in Switzerland, the data must be available. They told us, no, you can't, the government cannot make this data available, because Google will use the data and become even more powerful. So we also had to deal with arguments like this. So at the end, just so you understand the timeline of this whole process, of course, lawmaking in Switzerland takes years. The first vote, where you have 144 yes, it's from September 22, and the last two votes that you have under the image, they are from I think March. Wait, I have it down. Yes, from March 2023. So for Switzerland, it's an extremely quick parliamentary process. We were able to make it this quick because we supported the parliamentary members, and especially the members from the committees on every step of this process, like really explain them what interests are present, how can they really understand this quite technical law. And it was also possible because we had a very good collaboration with the public administration. I mean, probably you know it. If you want to change anything on the political level, before even talking to the members of the parliament, you have to have the administration with you. Without the administration, even if you have majorities on the political level, it's extremely difficult. So our process was mostly, what did the civil society do? I mean, it was, of course, it was not only Sage++, it was this whole open data, open source software ecosystem in Switzerland. For us, it was extremely important to have legally binding formulations inside the law. Did we manage to have everything legally binding? No. We'll talk about the downsides of the law a little bit later, but we were able to save a lot of formulations. So what was actually the impact of EMBAG? This law is very young. I mean, it's acted from the 1st January of 2024. Normally, you need years to understand, to analyze really the impact of the law. But from what we, maybe also you, see every day in Switzerland, it's, first of all, it's the economic impact. If you look at the tenders in the for IT projects, open source became much more important than it was before. I mean, it's still maybe a small part of all of the tenders, etc. But the Confederation, the public administration, is thinking much more in the direction of open source. And of course, it also enabled a lot of projects regarding open data. There was a huge impact on civil society. Maybe not a monetary one, did not get more funding because of EMBAG. But now we can say, hey, look, if we work together, if we have an ecosystem, if we master the parliamentary process, if we have good contacts inside the administration, we can change a lot of things. We really now have an example of very good collaboration between all of the stakeholders, and I think it gives us a little bit more of confidence when we're talking politics in Switzerland. And also, and this is maybe even more important, the impact on the digital sovereignty debate in Switzerland. I mean, this debate becomes even more important now when we are talking about our dependency on the US tech firms, etc. But still, this debate for maybe 2 to 3 years existed only in the French-speaking part of Switzerland. And now we're talking about it in Bern, in Zurich, etc. And the EMBAG is always a good example that comes back on all of this, those panel discussions, conferences, etc. But of course, I mean, it's a law, so law is always a compromise, especially in Switzerland. Of course, this law is far from perfect, but I mean, that's also cool, because if this law was completely perfect, we don't need civil society anymore, so we have still a lot of work to do. What are the biggest problems? Not really problems, issues, challenges, etc. It's, of course, the implementation, because, I mean, it's nice to have a very good law, and it's cool to give it as an example of civil society success in Switzerland, but at the beginning, a law is just a paper with some text on it. If you want to have this law to have a real impact, you need resources. You need people, and you need money. People, it's always a little bit difficult with public administration, and money right now is a huge problem, because Switzerland on federal level tries to not to spend too much money, or even is cutting in a lot of programs. So this is a huge problem for us, because less money means also less good people in the public administration. And also the cultural shift, because EMBAG enables people inside the administration who want to work in an open way, but it does not force those who don't want to do this. And the law has quite a lot of exceptions. So, for example, offices or parts of administration that do not want to make their data public, or I don't know, don't want to use open source software, or make source code public, they still can find quite a lot of excuses to say, no, this is not for us. And unfortunately, we know that this is happening right now, so we hope, or we will really have to work on the civil society, but also on the politics level, so that there are not too many loopholes in this law. And the biggest problem, especially in Switzerland, is the scope of application. The very first draft of this law had a completely different scope of application than what we have in the final law. Because at the beginning, this law was supposed to be for the federal administration and the cantonal administrations. And this is extremely important, because maybe not in Switzerland, the federal state is much smaller than actually cantonal states. The cantons spend a lot of money on digital solutions, software, etc. But cantons really don't like if the Confederation comes and makes something compulsory what wasn't compulsory before. So cantons said, no, we don't want to have binding standards. it's our territory. We want to decide what software we're buying, how we are doing our tenders. So the Confederation was a little bit afraid of it, and the scope of application that we have is quite small. It's only the federal administration, so there's a lot of work to do for the cantons. And even 2 years after the law became binding, some cantons are changing their position, and we see it quite often at the beginning. The cantons, the regional administrations and politicians don't want the federal level to have any say in how they're doing their work, and after some time they're like, oh, actually some standards would be nice because we're a little bit lost. We can't completely manage the whole e-government debate. We're already on the artificial intelligence level. We're lost. Confederation, help us. So this is cool, but this will be a huge challenge on the political level. So what is next? Because of course, after a lawmaking process, it's always before a lawmaking process, and I mean, Switzerland still has. I told you about the whole fax problem when we tried to manage COVID in Switzerland. But I mean, a lot of things have changed, and this is very cool. There is still a lot to do. Like, for example, this whole EMBAG debate, or the resources to implement it on the federal level. We are still at the chancellery. It's not. We don't have a department for technologies, or we don't have a department for digitalization. It's still a little bit, it's a niche subject. I mean, it's a niche subject in politics, and it's all, unfortunately also a little bit of a niche subject in the administration. So, for example, what's extremely important for CH++ is the whole debate about, of course, the funding, because at the very beginning there was this, I told you about the seed funding for civil society projects. Well, they canceled it right now, so we won't see the money that is actually promised inside the law. But it's also the institutions, what ministry, what offices, what resources, what people do we need inside the administration to be able to actually implement EMBAG or all of the other projects that we are working on or actually waiting for. So there is still a lot to do for us. And also the digital sovereignty narrative. This is very interesting, because the narrative, I mean, narrative is not a law, but narratives have a lot of soft power. And actually, when a narrative becomes shared by a lot of powerful people, that's when we can really implement change. That's what we saw from the beginning with EMBAG. What do we actually learn from this whole process? I think that civil society can be extremely powerful if we manage to establish an ecosystem. It's not just several organizations that do not work together, but if we really manage to have a coalition on a subject, even if it's a very complex subject. Like I said before, the collaboration with the administration is the absolute key if we want real transformation on the legal level. It's not cool, it's necessary to have majorities in parliament, but we need to have people who think like us inside the administration. So it really matters who works for our administrations on the federal, on the cantonal level. I think it's also, EMBAG shows that crazy ideas, and I mean this whole open source, open data thing was a crazy idea in the 90s, maybe until recently, then became a shared narrative. And this is really something, like I said, extremely powerful. And we need to master at any time the parliamentary, the lawmaking process. We need to be as good as the huge lobbying firms that work for big tech giants, etc. We don't have the choice. We need to be as good as them. regarding the parliamentary process, because if you master the process, you can more easily master the outcome. Thank you very much. I think that was quite quick. I know it's a lot of information, but I'm really looking forward to your questions or remarks. Thank you.
Did I understand this correctly that the law is in fact now?
Yes.
So was there already some published? Like, is there some example projects?
Sorry?
Are there some example projects that have been published?
You mean example? Well, the best example are the tenders. Confederation, the public administration wants now to buy software, open source software, much more. Regarding the pilot projects and the seed funding, the Confederation right now is not giving us any funding to do this. So I cannot show you a very cool civil society project funded by them. But there is a lot of there are a lot of interesting evolutions. For example, inside the Office for Topography in Switzerland, the Meteorology Office is also doing a lot of projects, especially in the field of open government data. So there are several projects and different offices that are right now reflecting quite well what EMBAG is about. Yes.
I think maybe I understood it wrong. It's more about using open source software, not that the state makes a tender for some solution, let's say an ERP system for the federal government, and then some vendor implements and they publish the code. That's not about it. It's more about using open software that already exists as part of the tender.
It's buying solutions, but it's also the solutions that are directly developed by the public administration.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
From what I understand, correct me if it's not the case.
I see.
I'm sorry. This law actually only applies to custom development and does not provide a favorization of buying existing software. So it does not apply, for instance, if you have, let's say, the government wants to buy an office suite or so. You cannot use the law to basically say they should buy something like Office, instead of Office 365 something, they should buy open source solution. So it has no leverage to this effect. And it's actually very simple. Let's say if a service provider wants to basically opt out from the application of the law, you can basically just productize a certain part of your custom development and sell it like a package with, let's say, like, yeah, this feature we already have, name it a product or something, and sell it through this as a service, and basically the law does not apply anymore. So that's one of the loopholes. And yeah, would be one of my questions to you. How, basically, what's the plan to, in fact, or to actually make this also apply to the choice of software. So basically, so that we have more reason to buy open source software instead of the commercial products. Yeah.
I think this would be a better question for OpenData.ch, because they're actually working very intensely on the future of this law right now. For us, the most important part is the scope of application right now. That means that even with the existing loopholes, this EMBAG solution, we want to see it applied in the cantons. This is like the CH++ priority right now. But I mean, of course, the whole public tender policy is much broader than only the elements from this law. It's not that because we have EMBAG that suddenly we don't have Microsoft anymore. Not at all. But it gives more possibilities to implement open source software in the public administration.
Thank you. Something is a recurring theme. Like the law doesn't make a lot of noise outside and it corresponds to digitalization. Digitalization is not very an issue, like a priority in the government. So is there more? So it's difficult. What's the difference between lobbying and marketing and going outside the bubble? Like is there an effort to make it a public discussion, actually?
Yes, and well, first, I mean, this subject being a niche subject, not very high on the political agenda, it also allows smaller stakeholders like the civil society, like the NGOs, to provoke change. Because from the moment where a subject becomes important to every political party, to economy Suisse, to SGB, USS, etc., small actors lose their power. Because if economy Suisse, if digitalization or technology becomes the most important subject for them, nobody will listen to us anymore. So for now, it has also very positive sides for the subject to be a little bit niche. But of course, I mean, fortunately, we live in a democracy. We want to have a public debate on this. We want citizens to participate in those processes. And actually, this whole digital sovereignty debate in Switzerland helps us a lot. There are at least one kind of constitution that has been changed that has digital sovereignty in it. It's in Geneva. There are similar debates, I think, in Zurich, also on the federal level. And since people are looking at the USA and they're like, yeah, we're afraid, what does it mean for us? Actually, this is a debate that allows us to bring those projects and to explain them to a larger public. Before, it was extremely difficult, and because if you go and read this law and you're not from the bubble you were talking about, it's extremely difficult to understand.
Thank you very much. Do you give some insights about what other countries or what the standards are? It feels like it's a modern law, but maybe there's other benchmarks that you're aware of or that people are aware of.
Well, I must admit, I asked ChatGPT about it. We did not do a comparative analysis. We're really super focused on Swiss politics. I mean, of course, you can't be really focused on Swiss politics anymore without looking at least at the European Union. I found a lot of guidelines. Germany, France, so the guidelines exist, but for them to be part of a law and not just soft law, to be compulsory like in this law, I think it's quite unique actually. I won't tell you that this is the most unique or the most strong open source open government aid law on the planet. I have no idea. But from other countries in Europe, I don't see right now an example like this.
Yes. Hi. I'm working as a web architect for the Commission for the Digital Directorate. And we're now building an EU open source solution catalog. So we're making this federated system. We fetch through APIs national catalogs of open source solutions for public administrations. Taking inspiration from something that was built in Italy. In Italy, they do use there is this developersitalia.it website. I mean, it's the digital agenda for the Italian government. They adopted this public YAML standard code. So basically, it's a YAML file that you inject your open source solution in a Git repository that makes the solution fetchable, discoverable by this national catalog. So the goal in Italy it is mandatory. The goal is to publish every software that is open source for public administration, made by or for public. So to promote the reuse and
knowledge sharing. And there is this process of binding or federating similar catalogs from different countries, member states. Of course, it's a kind of jeopardy scenario. Some even don't have any catalog. Others, like France, Germany, they already building this. And the adopted standard at the moment is this very simple YAML metadata standard that is called public YAML. Something also very similar to what is being done was done by the Foundation of Public Code, that is a Dutch association that is working in the same scope, just to share this. And
Cool, thank you.
Swiss is not part of EU, as far as I know, but for nothing changed in the meanwhile. But for sure, I think that the Commission will be interested in evaluating some kind of parallel and similar approach.
Of course. Thank you.
Sorry. Yes, actually I'm part of the management of CH Open.
Well.
So that's why I want to add here. So March 17 next week is an open hearing from Carl Diggy that basically that's part of the government, where a case from Schleswig-Holstein is promoted how to introduce open source software instead of the Microsoft solutions. They're doing this at scale. So the difference is in Germany there's no advantage of custom development in open source and open source by default, but there's a standardization for open source product choice. So from this specific part, they're ahead of us, and it's that's why they're also making this hearing in Switzerland to promote this part as well.
Thank you. Well, there are no more questions, and I mean we have a very interesting expert on this matter anyways. So thank you very much.